Hello and welcome to the Fighting Spirit Podcast. As always, I'm Jason and I have a guest here today, but this was a conversation that was recorded previously remotely. Your friend in the business, Curt, is on for this episode, and while there isn't much going on in the MMA world as far as fight picks or any real fights at all, there's still a conversation to be had, and Curt and I have a good conversation about a lot of things going on surrounding the MMA world and news. So I'll just let that kick off. Here's the show. Make sure this is it says it's recording. All right. I don't think it was recording before. It says it is now. All right.
It's all right. But anyway, crazy times for the MMA world. Am I right?
Yeah, man. Everything is certainly a little bit out there between, Mortal Kombat Fight Island with Dana White, the cancellation of Tony Khabib, the cancellation of Tony Gaethje, the governor of California going to Disney, and then Disney going to, ESPN or whatever, if you want to think of them one and the same, and then going and shutting down. It's freaking wild. But I think we should start with just like Tony Khabib. That's like the number one thing that kind of started snowballing, amongst this pandemic in the MMA world.
Well, they were so desperate to keep that fight alive, and I don't blame them, but I had a feeling from the get-go as soon as they started canceling sports, I'm like, this fight's going to fall through again. Just watch. And it did. And it did in such a way that was completely blameless because, Khabib was like, you need to tell me where we're going to be. And they told him, it's 99% going to be in Abu Dhabi, and He cleared it with Dana White. He's like, all right, then if it's going to be there and we're a month out, I need to go there now so I can prep, so I can acclimate. It made perfect sense to me, and Dana signed off on it. Dana said, listen, you can go, right? He went, and then it changed and it shut down.
Well, did you hear about what happened to him? That they landed in Abu Dhabi and he didn't have a passport, so they were get the hell out.
He was on aerial. He was talking to Brett Okamoto, and he said that the first place they landed was in Dubai, and when they arrived in Dubai, they had just shut the gates like 8 hours before he landed.
Yep.
And they said, we can't let you in. Like, we're not letting people in. Only people with, if you're a citizen, if you have a passport for the UAE, you can come in. But he didn't, so they had to send him back to Russia. And from Russia, he couldn't go back to the United States from there because he didn't have a United States passport. So they sent him back to Russia. He was hoping he could go from Russia to the United States. They wouldn't let him, so he had to go back to Dagestan. And in Dagestan, there's such a lockdown, like you can't even go to neighboring towns. Like you can't, like there's checkpoints on the road. You can't drive anywhere. So the notion that people had, like, they could try to sneak him out on a private plane, like that isn't going to happen. Like they've shut down the airports, any outgoing flights. If you don't have a passport for another country, you're not getting out.
Yeah. He said, I guess he lives in a rural place, and like you said, the nearest city is under lockdown, quarantine.
Yeah.
So
it is what it is. I am glad though that the event as a whole was shut down, like you said, because it is the right thing to do, because Tony is the most deserved, opponent for him. And if I were Khabib, I would just go out and state frankly, like, I am not going to fight anyone else but Tony Ferguson. Like, the next time I defend this belt is going to be against Tony Ferguson. I don't care where or how it has to happen, but he is the person that I need to fight next. And nobody else is going to step in and take that from him or me. That's what I would do. That's how I feel about the situation. And it sucks that, for the fifth time that this has fallen through, it's unbelievable.
This is the first time it's been no fault of either guy. We've had Tony fall out. We've had Khabib fall out. This time the world fell out. These guys, I think, were legitimately ready to go. I don't think there was any roadblock. I think, maybe it'd be better if Tony was a little younger, but this fight was going to happen.
Tony had, he made the notion that, Khabib was really running from him, that he could come back. And even Conor went on Twitter and said this one was Khabib's fault because he went away. But, now that the event is shut down completely, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. If Khabib stayed in the U.S., does it maybe maybe it has like a couple percentage points higher chance of happening just because maybe ESPN and Disney would have been like, all right, this is the one to make. Every other, like I've been saying, there's one fight fit for the apocalypse. It's Tony Khabib. That would be the only one I was willing to pay for. Honestly, we were going to originally talk about UFC 249, the card, Tony and Gaethje and such. But I wasn't going to buy that card. I was going to give my fight picks. I wasn't going to give them my money. I would have watched ESPN Plus or whatever they put on there for free, but I wasn't going to give them their money. I said I wouldn't. It didn't feel morally right.
But that's
honestly.
the thing. If ESPN flat out refuses to broadcast it because of this, the governor of California says to ESPN, you guys need to shut this down. They're not going to broadcast. There's nothing Dana can do. They literally got him by the short hairs. Like if ESPN says, listen, we can't do this. We're being politically pressured not to put this on and host any kind of gathering. Like that's it. It's done. Like there's nothing he can do.
Yeah. No, that was it. And ultimately the right thing happened. This fight should not have taken place. There's just, when you actually think about it, how many people need to be at the facility in order to have a fight? Like you need tons of guys for security. I mean, you get trained fighters, even though they're professionals, we know things get out of hand. You have to have all the camera, media crew, all the producers, directors, never mind the fight
medical
teams.
Staff on standby. You have to have the judges, the refs, everything. Like there's a lot of people.
Yeah,
production crew, everybody.
Some of them could be remote. Like I think you could honestly have the judges remote. I think it'd actually be a good time to test the waters with that, just because you have so many kind of incompetent judges out there that I think if we could get better judges that wouldn't necessarily have to travel to every event, give them multiple camera angles, give them a set of monitors, give them something where they can get maybe a better perspective than the fans. And I think it actually would have been a cool thing if they could have tried that out. No, they still can. But given the circumstances, I think some people could have not been there. Like Joe Rogan definitely could have commented remotely. He could have done like a fight companion kind of thing or something like that.
Yeah, that's
true.
how
would you feel about like remote judging, given kind of the climate of controversy around judging?
I mean, I am all for trying new things. Who was it? Strikeforce or Cage Wars? There was a smaller promotion that was recently, I don't know if they actually got to do it, but they were going to experiment with the open judge, like where they were going to display the judges' scorecards in between rounds.
Oh, I heard about that. I don't know if it ever took place, but
there was a smaller promotion that was going to experiment with that to see if it would be a good idea, to see how it would go over. I didn't hear any more about it, but I know that there's, and I think it's a good thing. I think we should try new things, judging remotely and things like that. And also, not even just with the UFC, but just a quick sidebar, like with you working from home and things like that, like there's going to be a lot of change in terms of like people working from home. I feel like that's going to become more commonplace now, especially when businesses see we don't need to have office space for these people if we can just work. They can just work from home. So I feel like that'll probably be a new trend, and you might see that happen with the UFC. They might, if this goes on long enough where they're forced to try to have certain jobs being done remotely, that could be a game changer, and who knows.
Yeah.
Maybe if they did that with the judges, it would improve their scoring and their accountability. I don't know. But
I think it could. I think, see, the problem with having like set judges or, I guess just a small pool of judges that are used again and again means that they're more likely to, be bought off and have, potential for fraud and corruption. But if we're talking about now transparent scorecards, where now, fans or other people can kind of see the writing on the wall as things play out. And you're like, there's no way that other guy won that round. You like hear, you would instantly hear the boos if it was like 10-8 and you're like, bullshit. Like, exactly. that was a dead heat even round. I mean, sure, somebody got to go 10-9, but to go 10-8 or the other way, like 9-10 for a guy, you would have people rip shit and the crowd, the cornerman would go rip shit. The fighters, you'd really have to be on your game, I think, in a close fight.
Well, when you think about it, though, look at any other sport. Look at the NBA. Look at the NFL. Like, during the whole game what your score is. How you're doing. You're not going – like, imagine if the NFL didn't keep track of the score. Like, if they didn't display the scores, right? Or if they didn't –
Too much CTA for that, man. Guys that have no idea what's going on.
Exactly. That's my point. Like, I feel like they should. I feel like there should be transparency with the scores. I think in any sport, really, I feel like you should know. I can't imagine. They're not. How many other sports are there where the player, the participant in the sport, doesn't know how they're doing during the course of the sport?
It's very few. It's basically only things that are subjective. Like I can think of gymnastics in the Olympics, stuff like that.
Not many.
No,
that's because gymnastics you can't. There's no break in between. I don't think, is there? Right?
Well, no, it's just that, it's not that you just pull off the move. It's how well you pull off the move, how you stick the landing, all that stuff is very subjective, So almost everybody can do the same routine. There's not really so many controversial, and I'm not a gymnastic expert, but there's only so many moves that people do, and so I think it just comes down
saying, like,
to
in
the
terms
way
of
you
scoring,
pull
though,
it off.
once you've done your routine or you've done your set, you immediately find out what the score is, right?
I believe so. Yeah, they have that whole thing where like they
Like,
go to the
they don't
corner
make
and they're
you
like
do 2 or 3 different
9.6.
routines and then you find out everything at the end. I think you find out everything in between, right?
Oh, you mean like if you're doing a whole host of events? Yeah,
Yeah,
you get like a running tally. You don't just do like your flow routine and then even bars and all that stuff and then find out what you did at the end. You find
exactly.
it out like
So
in between.
even they find out their scores in between. They know where
Yeah.
their standing is compared to everybody else. So there's no reason why that shouldn't happen in MMA.
Yeah, no,
I feel like
I think it should. I mean, cornermen and fighters are already pretty cognizant of what's going on. You hear cornermen all the time, like, "Hey, you're probably winning this fight. You can go into the third round and just like let's get to the end of the 5 minutes." Or you hear the cornerman like, "You got to pull something out here. You got to knock this guy out. You're losing. There's no way you're going to win except by stoppage." Like guys are already aware. So to announce to the fighters that this is the score and assume that it's going to change the way they fight, I think it's a little silly. They already know how to change.
there are going to be instances where it doesn't, but there will be instances where it does. Like, for example, if Dominic Reyes in the John Jones fight had gone into that 5th round knowing that he was behind on the judges' scorecards, even if he agreed with it, he'd be so pissed. He would have gone in there and he would have thrown the kitchen sink at that man, and
He very well could have.
and it might have changed the fight. Things could have gone differently.
And that was an instance where I thought Reyes won, and so you are absolutely right. Maybe he took his foot off the gas a little bit. Maybe he thought, "Hey, I got to survive 5, but I run 1 rounds 1, 2, and 3. There's no reason to overexert myself, get caught."
He had thought that he had won the first 3 rounds at least, and he, maybe he was trying to, he was being more on the defense towards the end because he thought he had done enough. And that was the thing, right. The misconception that these fighters have because they're not in the loop with what's going on in the judges' heads, and I think that needs to be more transparent. That's how I feel. I know a lot of other people would agree with me, but the powers that be need to make that decision, and I hope they do. I hope they do the right thing.
Yeah, me too. I hope they can just improve the sport. Hopefully they're talking about this kind of stuff since there's no fights to be made. Hopefully they're picking a location, athletic commission to work with. Probably somebody outside of Vegas. Like I think this is like a perfect, like we're having a fight night down in Delaware or something like that. Like give that small outlet, kind of a lower stakes event a chance to showcase that, or do it at like LFA, do it on one of the regional scenes, see how it works. The UFC, I think, owns or has a heavy partnership with LFA. So do something like that. Hell, do it on Dana White Contender Series.
Well, the whole Fight Island notion, I'm very interested in that because it depends on where it is. Because if the island, wherever this island is, if it falls under the jurisdiction of any particular state, he'll run into the same problem. The governor will just shut it down.
I think that's done. I think it was like an internet. I think it was going to be like, something like in the Caymans or Bahamas. It sounded like it was
somewhere in international waters. If it's somewhere in international waters outside the government's jurisdiction, I mean, they could do whatever they want. Essentially, it would be like that Enter the Dragon fighting island.
I know. Can you imagine if they did it on like a fucking oil rig? like it wasn't even an island. They just fucking helicopter people down onto an oil rig.
They could. Yeah, right. A shut down oil rig, but I feel like those fall under somebody's jurisdiction. Somebody would have some say in that.
Yeah,
probably. You'd have to get something that was completely privately owned that had no affiliation with the government at all.
Fighting Cuba.
Yeah, maybe.
I have no idea. That I don't know what the deal with Fight Island honestly was going to be. I think all of that's done. I think the UFC will just come back when things settle down. I have a feeling, we're just going to see like a slow startup or a slow resumption of what we were doing. So like we'll go from like nobody can go out to like restaurants are seating like a third of their capacity, half of their capacity. They're skipping every other table. Events will have limited attendance, and I think we'll get there. They can set up the seats in arenas so that people are kind of separated. Even movie theaters, you can kind of put only like 3 or 4 people in a row, and I think you can get back to business. I don't know if it's profitable, but you can definitely restart things.
It will be a slow crawl for sure, but
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. Real quick though, because this was some recent news. Because while there's no fighting going on, Anthony Smith had the freaking fight of his life the other day.
I had that written down, man. I made a few notes of stuff that we could talk about. That was certainly one of them. Yeah, that was nuts. That kid that he fought. I read something about him actually before we started this. So he was a high school wrestler. Not that that means he's like a combat expert or anything, but
Yeah.
he had some like wrestling or call it athletic background. And for him to take what Anthony Smith called his hardest shots, being about 170 pounds and 21 years old, was pretty incredible.
Did you see the video footage of that kid, like from other people's houses when he was running around screaming? Like, it was scary. That it looked like he was on PCP or something.
Yeah, I think he had to have been like meth, PCP. Like, he seemed superhuman.
I mean, when you hear Anthony Smith describe the carnage of the situation, like the guy's blood was all over the walls, on the floor. Like, Anthony Smith ran this dude over. He beat the hell out of him. I can't even imagine how many punches this guy ate to the face. Like, they talk about, like, his face was all bloody and swollen and everything at the end, and he didn't feel it. Yeah, he just kept going. Like, he kept fighting back. Anthony Smith was like, it didn't feel like he was human. Like, this, I mean, Anthony Smith is one of the most capable fighters in the world. Okay, and for him to beat on somebody and then be like, it didn't feel like they were human. That guy was on something. He was. Oh
yeah, something. For sure.
And,
for sure.
I mean, the worst thing that guy ever did, the best and the worst thing that guy did was going to Anthony Smith's house because he got stopped. Thank God he got stopped before he hurt anybody or caused any commotion. And obviously, Anthony's family, they're traumatized, and my heart goes out to them. I hope that they find a way to recover and move on from this, and find a feeling of safety in their own home again. But yeah, no, it was a scary thing to hear, and I'm just glad that he handled business and he kept his family safe. But yeah, that's scary, man. Scary.
Oh, absolutely. I actually hope some positive can come out of this. Obviously that kid had to have been a little bit out to lunch. He not that he should have, because things had been worse, but like he had no weapons on him. He was just trying to go in and fight people in their homes, make break-ins. Like, he was just up to absolute chaos for no apparent reason. And, breaking in Anthony Smith's house, getting the shit kicked out of him by a celebrity, but showing that he could basically, what I'm trying to say is get like some kind of fight contract, go channel some of this energy. And if he is as good as he seems without drugs, and he can kind of channel some athleticism in a positive way, I think it could be a good thing for him. I really do. You get guys like Ian Heinich did time at Rikers for drugs, right? He sold drugs. He's now in the UFC. And so I think guys can make good out of their fuck-ups, basically, Well,
I mean, it's a very tender notion, but I'm just going to say the one thing that was really lucky, because Anthony Smith, apparently, he always sleeps with a gun next to his bed, like 99.9% of the time. He's like, because they all concealed carry state in Nebraska. But he, on this particular night, and it's always that one time, the one time that the shit goes down, it never happens. He always sleeps with a gun next to his bed, but he said that he had been out somewhere, and he always carries his gun in his bag, and he usually takes the gun out of the bag and puts it on the nightstand. But this particular night, he did not do that. He left it in the bag, so it was not readily right there. So, I mean, and if it had been, he probably would have killed this dude. Like,
oh yeah,
he would have been well in his rights to do so. Like,
oh, absolutely. I mean, somebody breaks in your house like that, you don't know. Like Anthony Smith said, he wasn't going to bum rush the guy. Could have a knife, could have had a gun. Anthony Smith could have killed himself. Just turns out that this kid was stupid enough, chaotic enough not to prepare in any way for what he was doing, and it was the best thing that could have happened to, honestly, either one of them, given the situation. Anthony Smith didn't have to kill anyone. I don't know how he would feel about that if he had to shoot somebody in his home. I'm sure, no matter what the circumstances are, you still got to live with that fact. And the kid, can do some jail time and hopefully get control of his life. Hope it's a wake-up call.
I don't know. Either way, our hearts go out to you, man, Anthony Smith. Yeah, freaking badass. He's it's crazy stories, but yeah. So as far as the fight game, I mean, who knows? Who knows how this is going to play out? Obviously, I'm wearing my Khabib shirt right now.
I know, man. I can see it. Yeah, obviously this will be an audio podcast.
Khabib.
But
I love Khabib. I wish him all the best in the world, and I hope him and his family are safe. But I just hope that we can find a way back to this. I hope that we can get this fight to happen. We've been waiting so long, and
I know
now that this has been dropped 5 times, I'm just so disheartened. I'm just like, I want to see this fight. But at the same time, it's almost like I just want to get it over with. Like, it's not even that I feel less excited about it now because of how many times this has fought. Like, I want this fight so badly, but at the same time, it's almost just like I just want it over with. Like, I want this to be done.
Oh yeah, we got blue balls for it,
Yeah, exactly, blue balls for it.
Blue balls for sure. I like to think it'll, I in my heart of hearts, what I would like to have happen is like, it's week to week, month to month, whatever. And it's like, okay, we were given the green light to have so many people. We're fighting this week of July, this week, like whatever, not Khabib has to wait till September. Like, honestly, given the circumstances for the world, I would love to hear Khabib say, I've gotten an exemption from Ramadan. I'm going to maintain training. And when we get the green light, we're going to go. And they honestly just hold Tony Khabib, put it on ESPN, no pay-per-view, just pay those guys, advertise there. The world has nothing else to do. They'll watch it. And I think that's the way it should play out. Just, it's a one-off event. Just that fight, it happens. And,
it should be, but the problem is Khabib, he doesn't qualify for an exemption for Ramadan. I mean, he could probably try to work it, but that would take, in his mind at least, a sense of arrogance to feel like he doesn't need to do Ramadan for this. Ramadan exemptions basically fall in if you are ill or unable to take care of yourself. If you have any kind of restrictions from fasting due to health problems, or if you are a traveling person, if you're traveling and you can't fast at the appropriate times, things like that. But for sports training, for making weight, for a fight, that doesn't fall under that category. So if he were to appear before like a council of Islamic elders and appeal for that, they wouldn't give it to him.
So I only have some kind of anecdotal evidence, and I can't remember the fighter's name, but basically whomever it was, when they were on Joe Rogan or somebody was speaking about it, it all came from Joe Rogan's podcast. They said that because he fights for a living and that's how he supports his family, that he is able to receive an exemption so that he can train and fight during that time period. Now Khabib doesn't have that same argument, because I know he's a much wealthier man than your average $20,000 a fight guy. So I don't know if like you were saying, he would.
I do remember a story about a guy who had to train for a fight during Ramadan, and he fasted. He had to cut weight, and he managed to work it out so that he could still cut the weight and fast appropriately. But then Khabib, and again, this gets into, there's different sects of being a Muslim. Khabib is a Sunni Muslim from Dagestan. I don't know what their traditions are there necessarily and how they go about Ramadan. It might be a more intense, extreme version of it. I don't know.
I know. In my ideal.
At the same time, though, I will add this. Because of what's going on now, it might be better for him to just do Ramadan now and get it over with. Because if you can't fast, no matter who you are, unless you absolutely are in like dire health and you can't do it, if you can't fast now, you have to do it later. You have to make up for it at a later time. And if he were to get a pass for it now while it's happening, and the fight doesn't happen because the quarantines aren't lifted, it's probably better that he get it over with now. Because he said
that's fair.
He said the earliest he'd be able to fight after Ramadan would be August, because it goes from April 28th to May 28th, and then he needs at least like 45 days to
It's
recover.
actually the 23rd this year. I'm actually looking at a calendar. It doesn't matter.
He said he needs like 40 or 45 days to recover from that, and he said he gets back into a training camp. Let's say he does a month training camp, he can be ready for August. And he's been training for Tony Ferguson for so long. Like, he does. I don't feel like it's
just tune up. They're not looking at Tony for anything new. They're not examining a new opponent. They're just going through whatever the motions are at this point.
I think as far as like sparring and wrestling exercises, I feel like he's done everything that he can. I think he's absolutely ready. I think they could spend that month, just cutting the weight and making sure he needs to be, because I know he was having.
I think it's just about fitness at that point. Making sure his diet is back to where it needs to be, making sure he can cut the weight safely, making sure his cardio is going to be there. That's all they're doing. I think for him to work like a special technique on the ground or something like that, we're already well past that with these guys. They've trained for each other for the better part of the last decade.
Like there's no. I don't think there's any more fine tuning that they can do.
Exactly.
With Khabib though, I think the biggest thing with Khabib, I think, is the weight. He was showing signs of difficulty with the weight cut towards the end of this training camp. They were worried about it.
Stuff was so stressful though. Like I even look and not this has anything to do with. Well, actually, no, he didn't cut weight. Kevin Lee's fight, he didn't make weight, I believe, against Charles Oliveira, and he put in a poor performance. And I think part of it was just what's going on mentally in the world. You find out nobody's going to show up to the fight, and your mom's back home, and you're in Brazil, and people are dying. I don't know how you concentrate on the fight. And maybe that's for the best that Khabib and Tony didn't fight, because then it would have been that what if. What if Tony caught him? What if Khabib just mauled Tony? What? There would have been so many what ifs had this been an ideal situation. What would have happened differently?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be there's what ifs with almost every fight, and with Tony and Khabib, I feel like this fight. However, if and when this fight ever happens, no matter how it plays out, there will, barring some sort of like an epic, Ben Askren type knockout from one of these guys where it's so decisive that there's no point in running it back ever. I feel like there will always be the question of like, well, what if they did it again? I feel like this fight may have to happen more than once to definitively decide who's the better man.
Yeah,
because they're both that good.
That happens almost every fight. When I think of Khabib, is obviously there's the Conor fight. There's the what if for that. There's the GSP what if. Not that they've ever fought, but like the GSP, prove himself against, or Khabib prove himself against GSP. I don't know how you look at it at this point. I think at this point, is GSP proven can come back to fight a guy at Khabib's level, especially if he goes down a weight class. Like that's a very big what if. But I don't know. Yeah. There's what ifs on all of MMA.
Khabib, he's 32 now. He's almost the same age as me. So he's, his metabolism is going down. He's in his prime for sure, but now his weight cutting has gotten difficult again. For Abu Dhabi, he came very close to not making weight. That's he had to get naked on the scales. He was starving himself that last week that he was there before the fight. There was a lot of things that came out after the fact that he was hurting for that weight cut.
I think what we're going to see with him in his career, I think when he talks about the couple of fights left, I think part of that is because of the weight cutting. I think he realizes, he doesn't want to go to 170. He likes his legacy. He likes his dominance. And I don't think he wants to have go fight as like kind of I wouldn't say a shell of himself, but for him to go to 170, he's certainly not going to be the big fish in the small pond anymore.
No, he's not going to be as dominant at 170 because those guys are bigger. They're more difficult to take down. And he would never. I mean, as long as Usman is the champion, he would never fight him.
No, they're the same management.
Those two are brothers. Yeah. They're very, very close. So they're not going to. Barring Usman losing to somebody, and then maybe potentially, but then I don't see it. I think you're right. I think Khabib is very dominant at 155. That's where he rules. It's where he is the most potent version of himself. To move up a weight class would be a very dangerous thing for his legacy. I mean, not to say that he couldn't do it. I feel like he would stand just as good a chance as anyone else, but he would be more on an even playing field. Yeah. At 170 versus being kind of the big fish in the small pond at 155.
Absolutely. There's some awesome dream fights up at 170 for him. Like him versus Damian Maia. I don't want to get too much into like just Khabib versus whomever, but him versus Maia, him versus Gilbert Burns. Like some of these fights out there, I think are phenomenal for him. They maybe aren't the same like money fights that we get with
him versus Tyron Woodley,
but Tyron Woodley. Like supposedly he's going to fight Colby, they're saying now, because I don't know what the Leon Edwards situation is.
Leon Edwards couldn't get out of England.
Yeah, no, I don't know how soon we'll be able to get things back up, so I'm saying. But.
Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see. There's going to be a lot of things happening and you're going to hear some things and things are going to change. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be it's trying times we're living in, man. It's trying times. You have to worry about taking care of yourself. And, unfortunately we don't have major sporting events to, entertain us right now. And it's fun to think about these things and hope for the best. But, the powers that be will have to play out and see what happens. But in the meantime, I just hope all these guys stay safe, they take care of themselves, nobody gets sick. And, I just hope that we come out on the other side of this well, and hopefully a bit wiser. So,
yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's honestly very well said. Just to talk about other fight that it was kind of a dream fight, but was actually booked. Tony versus Gaethje. What did you think about that one? I'm actually willing to say what I crunched for that one. I'm going to talk about Tony Khabib. I think I'll share that later. Who I crunched out was going to win. I'll tell you after the podcast. But in Tony Gaethje, I did actually have Tony beating Gaethje in that one.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Finish.
No, I was going to say, I think that, honestly, Gaethje had that, like I call it, puncher's chance, that improbable moment that he could have connected with Tony. Tony gets hit. I think the same thing could be said for Tony Conor. Tony gets hit, and guys that hit hard are more likely to put him out than other guys that are volume strikers who don't concentrate on striking, like Khabib. They're going to have a different kind of fight. And I think because of Tony's, I wouldn't call it disadvantage, but the fact that he relies on his chin a lot could have been to his detriment against Gaethje. But as the fight went on, his whole training camp for Khabib, it was short notice for Gaethje. Obviously, the ground game of Gaethje is supposedly there, but never proven in the cage. I think that Tony would have had the highest likelihood of winning and he was my predicted winner for that one. I think that short of Gaethje just clipping him on the chin just right, Tony was going to beat him like everybody else we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. It's a very real possibility. I had a few different feelings about that when it was announced. First, I agree. I feel that Tony probably would have won. And I feel like he would have won on the ground. I feel like he would have probably darsed him and choked him out because Gaethje is a power puncher. He is a great striker. But he, as a fighter, as a fighter, he is nowhere near as dynamic as Tony. And actually, he and Tony have the same qualifications with wrestling. They have the same background. They both have state championship wrestlers. However, like you said, Gaethje does not rely on that ever. He hasn't honed that and kept up with that, sharpening it in the cage. So I feel like I'm sure he keeps up with it in training, but it's a different thing when you're in the cage and you're relying on it on a regular basis like Tony does. Tony's skills there are razor sharp, just like his elbows. And I feel like Gaethje, if it came to a grappling contest, he would have, I think, just gotten overwhelmed and overcome by Tony. I think he and Tony would have started off exchanging on the feet, and as soon as Tony started tasting some of those blows, he would have been like, okay, I need to adjust, and he would have gone for some sort of a takedown or Darce choke attempt. I think he would have gotten it that way. Yeah, however, I will say this, just because of, referring back to what I said earlier about how I felt just like so disheartened by the fact that Tony and Khabib fell through again. I just wanted it over with. There was a part of me, I will be honest with you, there's a part of me that would have loved to have seen Gaethje win, just to take Tony out of the equation and not have to worry about this fight anymore. Just to be like, you know what, I'm sick and tired of this, these two fighters not able to fight. They're always falling through for one reason or another. And you know what, let's just get rid of Tony because he clearly is, the fight between the two of them, like the universe just won't allow it. The universe can't handle it. It's too big. It's too insane. Take Tony out of the equation, Gaethje, let Gaethje fight Khabib, and I would imagine Khabib would steamroll Gaethje.
Yeah. I was actually going to bring up that you kind of just segued in beautifully. The fact of the matter is, what you said is, I think, honestly true. Gaethje does not sharpen his tools in the cage actively, and perhaps he trains a little bit of wrestling. But if he expects to go into a fight with Khabib as somebody that's his equal or somebody that can nullify his takedowns and wrestling game, his top position, and keep it standing, I think that Gaethje is in for a rude wake-up call. I think that Dustin Poirier tried to have that same mentality that, because he trains an American top team, he gets exposed to wrestling, that he uses takedowns in the cage, that he can probably hang with Khabib in that matter. And honestly, fact of the matter is, recently the only guy that I think we saw take Khabib's wrestling super seriously was actually Conor. Conor defended, he was steamrolled, but he defended positions at times very effectively. And it wasn't until the fourth round where obviously he, was decisively ended. But I mean, look at the takedown defense that Poirier thought he was going to have against Khabib. Khabib had him dead to rights down every single time. And I think that he would do the same thing to Gaethje because of false confidence or bravado or looking back at his history in the NCAA. He doesn't use it in the cage. It's not sharp. And I don't think it would even – I think it would have been to his detriment. He would have been better off just training stand-up instead of thinking that he could rely on it.
Exactly. Actually, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like the best example of wrestling defense that we've seen against Khabib was done by Al Iaquinta. Just because
actually, you're right.
He didn't obviously provide any kind of real offense grappling-wise, but he did manage to stave off Khabib long enough to keep Khabib from just having his way with him the whole time.
That is fair. That fight has always been weird to me because I honestly feel like we didn't see Khabib at 100%. I feel like he didn't have to step on the gas too hard to beat Al. I don't feel like he was out to really kill Al, to be honest. I think Khabib realized that he was there getting the shot of a lifetime in Al Iaquinta's case, and maybe he was as tuned up and ready to go as he could be, but he was nowhere on Khabib's level. And there were times in that fight where you could see Khabib absolutely maul him for a round and Al not be able to even do anything to get back to his feet. And then Khabib just playing stand-up just because he could, And I don't think he was taking a round off. I think he just was toying with him,
Knows. I mean, yeah, hey.
But like I said, right, Al did stop a couple of good takedowns. So did Conor, though. So I don't know. maybe the lights of the situation makes me more apt to think Conor did better. But you're absolutely right. Al is certainly a very.
Let me ask you a question though. The fight isn't happening. We're not going to see Tony versus Gaethje, but why did Conor not step up into that role? I thought he was going to be the first person they would call as a replacement.
Well, there's a couple different reasons. The number one thing to me, I think at this point, is the fact that Conor lives in Ireland, and internationally, everything is relatively shut down. If Khabib can't get to Abu Dhabi, or it can only go into Russia, I don't know how Conor gets to the U.S. under the same circumstances, And then would he be able to go back home to Ireland? He's like on social media, he sounds like the voice of reason, calling for the shutdown of all the ports and the airports, seaports and airports for all non-essential travel. So he's kind of being true to his word, it seems. I think probably the fight was offered to him. I just don't think the circumstances are right.
The right person to give it to was Gaethje. I was glad they gave it to him.
I mean, I think in Colorado. Tony's up in Big Bear. The travel isn't too far. Fairly short notice, I think that was the fight that made the most sense. And honestly, Gaethje, for what it's worth, was more deserving of the interim title shot than Conor.
Absolutely, 100%. I agree. Just all the trash talk and things that were going on. Like, Conor was like, I'm going to be ready for one of these guys when one of them pulls out. Like,
but the circumstances are so much different. I think honestly, we saw like what would have happened if either guy pulled out. If Tony pulled out, I think the UFC would have went, okay, great, I'm going to make some money. We're going to do the Conor Khabib too. And then if Khabib pulled out, Tony Conor, they don't really have like a huge beef. They'll probably put Gaethje in there because it's the more logical rankings thing to do. So I think they had contingency plans for either guy, and that's how they worked out.
This I feel like Tony feels so just like cultural. So Tony didn't find out about the event being canceled in entirety until he was doing an interview about it. Like, he was in the middle of an interview about the fight, and then when the news broke to everybody, that's when he found out. Like, they told him in the middle of an interview, like, we're just receiving word now that they've canceled the event. Yeah, so like nobody from the UFC told him ahead of time, like, hey, this isn't being put on anymore. So like
I don't know how much notice there was.
He's very out of the loop. Like, the UFC does not want him to succeed. I just feel like he's got a very, he's not on good terms with the UFC like that. Like, they're not looking at him as a potential like future. I think they're putting all of their chips on red with Khabib here, and they're hoping that Khabib wins, because if Khabib, God forbid, I love Khabib, he's the one that I'm pulling for, but Tony Ferguson, I can't take anything away from that man. I respect him and his abilities and what he's gone through and overcome to get to this point. And he would be absolutely 100% deserved if he became the champion. But that would be interesting to see how his relationship with the UFC would change if, he were to win. Because up until now, it seems like they've just been kind of jilting him and not giving him the respect that he deserves. So
yeah, I don't know where that comes from. I know he changed management recently, and I can't imagine Tony's like a real nuts and bolts guy on the contracts and working with the UFC. I feel like he relied a lot on his management and just kind of like hung on, just took care of the athletic aspect of the business. So yeah, I don't know. I do know though that if Tony were to become champion, you would certainly see the lightweight title defended more often, solely because Tony doesn't have anywhere near the same money that Conor or Khabib has, and would need to fight more often to take the advantage of having that belt. Part of the reason you want it is to get those big paydays. And Tony has been kind of shortchanged throughout his career, and I think he would use it to make as much money as possible. Kind of like what we've seen with John Jones recently coming back after we could talk about his new screw up, but he was a guy, he was fighting every couple of months because he was like $500,000, never mind pay-per-view points. So he was just raking it in at that point because he had to. He was so far behind the eight ball, I'm sure, in his finances.
Yeah. You're right. I think that is very true. And, unfortunately, Tony's getting up there in age for a fighter. He's 37 now. So he's
36, but I mean, I'm not sure when his birthday is. He could turn 37 this year. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but either way, like he's getting to the point, in age for a fighter where he's looking at, he's heading towards his twilight years in his career.
Yeah, especially at lightweight.
Yeah, exactly. And so obviously he has sustained a lot of injuries. And he pushes himself beyond the limit. You know, he's always redlining himself, and he can take it now, but eventually something's going to give. And I think, you know, part of him, you know, tearing his LCL just with a simple trip, that was his body telling him, like, you're going way too hard.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, hey, I'm not his trainer. I'm not going to tell the man what to do or presume.
I don't even know if Tony really has a trainer. You know, he just kind of seems to do whatever he wants.
I don't think he has a head coach. I think he just, you know, he's got Eddie Bravo, who's his wrestling coach, and he's got Muay Thai coaches and kickboxing coaches and stuff like that. And I think he's got Wing Chun trainers or whatever. He has a bunch of different people that he works with, but I don't think he is his own head coach. He's
not like Javier and Khabib, basically.
Yeah, no, he's got his own. I mean, he built his own gym.
Yeah.
He built his own gym. He does everything himself. He's got his own plan, his own agenda for how he wants to train and what he wants to do. So he is essentially his own head coach. He's got specialists that he works with to help him hone and fine tune his skills. But yeah, so he's both the fighter and the trainer in and of itself. So, and I respect him for that. He's probably one of the most hard-working fighters I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Like, you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who works harder and does more than him, and who does it more, you know, and who does it more by themselves. Like, he's always, like I said, like, he builds everything himself. You know, he's got a very close circle. Like, he's got his wife, he's got Eddie Bravo, he's got the few people that are very close to him that work with him. So like I said, I admire, and like I said, as much of a fan of Khabib as I am, I'm a huge fan of Tony. I've become a big fan of his. I respect the hell out of the man. And so it's a very hard, that fight, if God willing we ever see it, you know, it'd be a very hard fight for me to watch, because, because I love and respect both those guys. And, you know, unfortunately in that situation, somebody has to lose. And I've been, you know, backing Khabib for a long time, for years now, you know, ever since the first time I saw him when he fought Michael Johnson. You know, I've been a big fan of his, and I've followed his story. I've invested, you know, emotionally, and you do that when you have a favorite fighter. I've invested emotionally in, like, his story, the part of, you know, where he came from, and when you think about the obscurity of where he came from and how far he had to come to get to where he is, like, only a very special person could do that. You know, a unique person amongst unique people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at the same time, just how he's handled himself with such grace and humbleness, and that was, you know, he checked off all the boxes for me for what I look for in a great fighter. But at the same time, Tony Ferguson does too. Like, he has overcome all kinds of adversity. He has fought his way tooth and nail. Everything that he has, he earned it. Nothing was ever given to him. So, you know, it's just hard. You know, I respect both these guys, and it'd be very difficult for me to watch that and be able to, like, you know, be like, oh, you know, I would enjoy it and be sad at the same time. It'd be a very mixed bag of emotions. You know, it's not like when I watched Khabib fight Conor and I was ready, just kill Conor.
I know. I remember that.
That was a very easy fight for me to get excited about. But this will be hard, and I hope we see it. But I mean, who knows? Who knows what'll happen?
No, everything's very much up in the air. I think there's at least two silver linings to take away from this, though, and then maybe we could talk about a couple other things that came up. One, this fight will probably not take place in New York, because New York is a hot spot right now, and I can't imagine they'll set up the nearest next event in Brooklyn, right? So we're probably talking about Vegas, California, a better commission for Tony Khabib, you know, one that won't be stopped via doctor, more than likely. So I think that's very much in Khabib's favor. And then the other thing,
I'm actually happy about that.
Oh, yeah, me too. And the other thing is that Tony is a guy, like you were saying, he trains mostly in isolation. He's got a couple of guys, and leading into this fight, assuming it were to take place this coming Saturday, Khabib would have been training with very few people, probably would have just been doing a lot of road work, cardio, cutting weight by himself. Who knows? Maybe he wouldn't even have made weight. Can you imagine a fight where he wasn't eligible to retain his own title?
I was going to ask you, what happens if the champion doesn't make weight? He can't retain the title?
No matter what? You know, as I say it, I'm not sure what the deal with that is, you know? Well, see, he would still be the lineal champion. He'd still be the lineal champion. He wouldn't lose his lineage. So he would still technically, I guess he would still be the champion if he won, but he would give up some of his
lineal champion in the UFC, though?
I mean, it's not quite the same as like boxing, but he would still be the last person to have won the belt. You know, he would fight for the belt again it would still be a retention.
Like
of
you
his
would still retain the. I don't know if you already have the belt. I mean, if you don't make weight,
it's just the money if you're the champion.
Yeah, no,
it's just
obviously, if you don't make weight, you lose a big chunk of money. Like Tony Ferguson, I think would get like a third of his purse.
Exactly, which is
Something
probably
like that,
pretty big at that.
Yeah,
at that
exactly.
level.
So that'd be a huge payday for Tony. I don't think they would strip Khabib of the belt if he's still like if he was so overweight that he couldn't even qualify to fight. I don't know where the barrier is for that. Is it like more than?
It's like 10 pounds. I think it's somewhere around 10 pounds. That if you're that far over, most athletic commissions won't even sanction the bout.
Right. Yeah. So if he was within like 3 or 4 pounds or whatever it is, I mean, as the champion, I feel like they couldn't strip you. You just lose money, and obviously a lot of credibility as a fighter. Obviously, as a lot of you would lose a lot of credibility as a fighter, as a professional. Like people would be very angry at you for that. And I think that would spur Tony to like go even harder to make sure that he won.
Oh yeah, for sure. That would be quite the situation. But I want to talk about a couple other things. I feel like we've been pretty Tony and Khabib heavy, so I'm gonna bring a couple other things. John Jones's DUI. What do you think of this?
I mean, it seems par for the course, don't you think? This is his second or third DUI, something like that.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Was he drunk during the hit and run?
Well, he had drugs on him.
Had drugs on him?
There were drugs in the car. I think he had cocaine in the car or something. So I don't know. I mean, in this, luckily there was no like altercation with police. Like he complied. He said that I'm drunk, and he said I had been drinking. He had an unregistered firearm in the car, which makes for an interesting thing. But he wasn't really punished. Like I think what was it? The judge just told him to go home. Like he didn't.
Yeah, house arrest. He's under house arrest. Yeah, in the time when everybody's quarantined. So he got a big time slap on the wrist. The fact of the matter is he didn't hurt anyone. Didn't get into a car accident. He was just kind of busted. Obviously, gun laws aren't quite what they are here as they are in New Mexico. So I feel like there's a lot of leniency for that kind of stuff out there.
If he had gotten pulled over with that here, it would have been
in New York. New York would be in jail.
Exactly.
Their butts. I think at that point, but New Mexico is the Wild West, so to speak.
I think I don't know. I've told you this before about John Jones. I am all for a redemption story. It seemed like after everything I know, right? I was hoping that he would have changed his ways, and for a time there, it seemed like it did. He tried to squash that beef he had with DC and, be like, I don't want to hate this man anymore. And I mean, what point does he have to hate him? You beat him twice. So, you don't have any grudge to bear, but I don't know. John Jones, he's the greatest of all time, but he's just a man. He's fallible. He's imperfect. He has a lot of flaws, character flaws that lead him to get into stupid situations. And I'm not going to judge the man because he's no different than you or I or anybody else that's out there. Anything could happen to us. We try our best not to. I think him being who he is, I think he's just a wild man. I think he's just a wild child. He's been like that for a long time. And I think he's trying to grow up, but he needs to try harder. And I think the people around him need to start really giving him a kick in the ass and be like, you need to get this stuff under control. Like, I don't know, like his wife, his brothers, his family, like they all need to do something. Like, I feel like those people around him, if he had I feel like if his support system was a lot stronger, I feel like he wouldn't be as apt to have these things happen. But like I said, I'm not here to judge the man. I don't know him. I wasn't there. I only know what you know from what we see in the media and the news and things like that. I think it's sad for his legacy, that he gets into these stupid situations. And thankfully, like you said, nobody was hurt. But I hope for his own sake that he gets his act together and finally grows up and stops doing this stupid stuff, because one day he will hurt somebody. I mean, he hit and run a pregnant woman.
I know.
It almost, how much worse, it doesn't get much worse than that, and what's going to happen? Like, he's going to one day get into a drunk driving accident and kill somebody.
He absolutely could. And then his career 100% is done. It's vehicular manslaughter at that point. So there's actually a point I want to make, but I got to use the bathroom. So I'm going to pause this real quick and we'll just come back. Just give me like a few seconds. I'll be right back. Okay.
That's fine.
All right. We're back recording now. So the point I wanted to make is something that actually came up on Joe Rogan and Brennan Schaub when they did the podcast. Did you listen to that one, by the way?
I listened to parts of it, not the whole thing.
Okay, so at some point they do talk about John Jones, and Shaw brings up an excellent point, and I think it's worth mentioning here, is that John Jones said, even though he was drunk, that he has terrible short-term memory, which could be an indication of some form of CTE. He also could just have a bad memory. I mean, some people do. He's also a little bit drunk, so this isn't like a raise the alarm situation, but he could have a little bit of CTE, and associated with head trauma or CTE is a lack of impulse control. And so I know you say having good people around him and, somebody kind of controlling his life, he just may not be able to control himself in those ways. It's a really stressful time. There's no place to go, nothing to do. He can't really train, right? So he probably just lost a lot of direction and didn't have any impulse control to like not go drinking, not shoot his gun into the air in downtown Albuquerque. Like all these things that we take for granted as, what's called normal average citizens that are capable of, controlling ourselves. He just might not be able to. When he gets an impulse to do something, he might just do it.
Well, if that's the case, I mean, he should definitely, seek out a neurologist, get an MRI, it's CAT, CT scan, whatever, and, see if there's
I don't
actually.
know if I'd want to know that if I was a pro athlete at that level, though. I mean, once could you still fight? Like, I mean, could you, knowing that, like, every time you go in there, you're going to get a little bit dumber, a little bit more damaged? Wouldn't it be better to not know?
I mean, it is possible. It is possible, but at the same time, I mean, when you look at his career, he hasn't taken a whole lot of damage in the ring. I mean, he's never suffered any. He's never ever suffered like a major knockout or anything like that.
See, we don't know. Fighting, the actual fighting side of fighting, the prize fighting aspect of it is. I think it's such a small percentage of what the guys do as far as like sparring and everything to prepare. Like we have no idea what kind of damage John has taken leading up to these fights, especially back, because he's not an old guy, but he's still like a little bit more in the old guard. He fought guys like Hua and Glover Teixeira, guys that, for the old guard before him. And so training techniques have evolved, and we don't know what kind of damage he took in sparring leading up to who he is today. I know today guys definitely don't spar like they used to. Everything's a lot softer. I mean, Tony doesn't even spar at all, and he could have taken a lot of damage. We don't know. John could have been knocked out in training. We have no idea.
That's true, too. I don't know. Like I said, however you break it down, it's just sad. It's just sad to see a man who is hailed as the greatest of all time, who is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, get into stupid things like this,
Yeah,
and
it's ruined his star power.
And the last thing I will say about it is this, is if, God forbid, one day he actually, he accidentally kills somebody and, during one of these stupid escapades, we're going to have all this evidence leading up to this. Like, this is a pattern of behavior. Like, why wasn't something done about this? Why didn't people, keep this guy away from weapons? Like, there's going to be a whole case about that. Like, this guy was clearly a danger to society. He hit and ran a pregnant woman. He had DUIs. He had all this stuff that happened. And no preventative measures were taken. Like, they didn't take his guns away from him. They didn't take his license away from him. Like, after this, I feel like he should have his license taken away from him. Like, you're clearly a danger. You're a threat.
Yeah,
you're driving around drunk, shoot your gun in the air. Like, I would take your license away in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Fact of the matter is, he's a privileged, special individual, and he, has more rights than an average citizen. That's just kind of the way things are working out. He gets better lawyers. He gets treated better by the judges. People know who he is, and he gets special treatment for it. If I did that, if I drove around Albuquerque shooting a gun in the air drunk, you better believe my ass would be in jail. I would have there was no way they'd put me under house arrest for doing something like that. It's the same for you,
Exactly.
Never mind which state.
You got a slap on the wrist, but it's just sad because I don't ever want him to hurt anybody, but I feel like if he doesn't check his ways, he will. Eventually, he will, and it's going to be the biggest tragedy of all time. Because and everybody could see it coming. It's not like it was a surprise out of nowhere. Like, he'd been consistently having this pattern of behavior, and people scoffed at it, look at, oh, he's just a party boy, he's a fighter, he's a wild man, this and that, and no preventative measures were taken against this individual. And this is why I feel that, like, you should not be. You may be a special person in the ring, but when you're amongst the rest of us, you're not.
No,
you should not be held. You should be held just as accountable as anybody else, and that is part of the reason why this pattern of behavior continues, is because nobody's holding him accountable like that. They're letting him slide, and because of, what do you expect? If you don't discipline a child when they're doing something wrong, they're just going to keep doing it. Same thing with adults. If you don't punish an adult for when they're doing something wrong, they're going to keep doing it. It's human behavior. It's how it is. And if you're not punishing him and making him see the error of his ways and pay for them, he's just going to keep doing it. And it's going to get worse. And eventually someone's going to get hurt. And it's going to be something that he'll never come back from. And I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see him destroy someone's life. And then that's how he learns his lesson. No, he should learn it now. And I worry about that with him, because I have a lot of respect for him as a fighter, as an athlete, and everything. And he, as a man who is blessed with so much God-given talent, he really is so much God-given talent, and he squanders it. He abuses it. He takes it for granted. It's a
blessing and a curse when you're that talented, Like, I'm sure John works hard. Let's not beat around the bush that he doesn't work hard.
No, I'm not saying
but
he doesn't work
given
hard.
so much talent.
Yes, but he clearly
Appreciate it.
He's clearly arrogant about it, though. He takes a lot of things for granted. I feel like he takes a lot of things for granted, even though he'll act and say like it does, but his actions state otherwise. So yeah, I mean, the state of New Mexico, they're gonna have a really hard time explaining how, if ever one day he runs somebody down or hits somebody and kills them, or some, a parent coming home with their kid and the child dies in the car crash with him because he was driving around drunk again. There's going to be a lot of hell to pay for that. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to have to answer for that.
Absolutely. But I think we've said enough on that topic. I got two more here that I looked up that I think maybe you'll definitely have an opinion on one of these. So you were once a wrestling fan, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
WWE and everything. So did you hear what Ronda Rousey said recently?
I heard the article popped up on my phone that she had left wrestling due to the fans. The fans were ungrateful.
She called the fans ungrateful. And I just think that is extremely backhanded of her to say. She was welcomed with open arms as a real celebrity athlete into the WWE. She was given everything that guys, or men and women, have to work for almost a decade to earn. Some guys like Hulk Hogan are kind of moved up to the top very quickly, and there's other guys that are just jobbers for years and never quite catch a break. And she was given the key to the kingdom and kind of shit on people for just showing up and having these fights or matches.
Yeah. Well, I will say this because I have not watched wrestling in a long time. From what little bits and pieces I catch here and there via YouTube, social media, whatever. There was one incident that I can refer back to that really made me feel like, okay, maybe this is why she feels this way. And it was right at the beginning of her career in the WWE. I don't know who she was in a match against, but she was the face. She was the baby face in that fight, and she ended up losing. I think it might have been like against Charlotte Flair or something.
That would make sense. They had that whole
and she took a beating in that fight, in that match. She got hit with chairs or something. Like, she was clearly roughed up. Like, you could see it. Like, she looked almost like she did like at the end of a hard fight. Like, she was disheveled. She clearly had been hit and slapped around. And she was supposed to be the babyface. She was the hero in that fight, and essentially she got screwed over. That was supposed to be the storyline, that she was screwed over and cheated. But then as she was walking up the ramp, the crowd was booing her. The whole crowd was booing her as she was walking up the ramp, and she stopped and she looked around and she had this look of sadness and disgust that was very visceral. And she's not that good of an actress. Like, she was not faking that. That was real. She was literally looking at the crowd, and you can look it up too. Like, she just had this look of sadness and just disgust. Like you're booing me? Like, I'm the hero. You're booing me? Like, it was just like this, like, how dare you look on her face. And that for me states, with this exit that she's given, that for me, that moment right there says it all for me.
In wrestling, you have to take the hand that the fans deal you.
Exactly. But I think also what you said about her getting the keys to the kingdom right away being given to her, the fans see that, and I think they deemed her as unworthy of it. I think that's what it was.
That's a good point. Roman
There's
Reigns
a lot of
has had
wrestling
that
fans that do not give a damn about the UFC or you being a fighter. You get what you earn, okay? And because she was brought in as a celebrity contender, she was given the title fight right away. Like, she didn't have to earn it. She didn't have to, work her way through the ranks. That means something to the fans. It really does. Being a former wrestling fan, I will state that, in the old days, Like they didn't have celebrity, fighters like they did now. But that's how you learned to love a wrestler over time. Like they didn't just bring someone in and you loved them right away. Like they had to earn it with their work ethic, with their abilities in the ring, with their ability to show, to put on a story for you to follow. You gotta get invested. You gotta get invested in them. And I'm sure there was, UFC people like us, UFC fans. You're gonna watch her wrestle and you'll be like, this is trash. This is garbage. This is fake. She's not really fighting, because you've seen what it looks like when she really fights. This is just an act. So you're not gonna watch that. You're like, this is just her putting on a show. Like, I don't care. Real die-hard wrestling fans, and a lot of them are, they're not gonna fall for that. They're just gonna be like, you're just a celebrity that they brought in, and you didn't earn any of this, and we don't care about you. And I think the part of that is why she didn't get the reaction from the fans and the love from them that she thought she deserved. But like, she'll never go out there and get a reaction like The Rock or Mick Foley or Stone Cold Steve Austin, like those
John Cena.
John Cena, whoever, people that paid their dues, people that went in there night after night after night and got the hell beat out of them to put on a show. The Undertaker, that man, like she'll never be at that level because she didn't pay her dues there like they did. I
want to actually and I don't know if you watched it. If you didn't, I don't have to get too far into it. But I didn't watch WWE, but I did read and see a couple of highlights. So they did like some, I'm going to call them like B-movie matches where they were completely staged on a set. Did you see any
WrestleMania, right?
Yeah. Did you see any of the Undertaker's, was it Boneyard match with AJ Styles?
Yeah, there was like a Boneyard match or something.
Yeah,
where
they fought like I don't know, like a sawmill, I guess, or something.
Yeah,
like that.
It looked like it was a barn or something out in the woods. He fought like 3 or 4 guys that were out there too. I mean,
I thought that was interesting. Like, honestly, I think that's a great way for the Undertaker to continue having matches if he wants to, not hang it up. If they want to put on these like really produced, polished events like that. From what I saw, it seemed kind of cool. And it lets the Undertaker, still have a gimmick without being, honestly, a gassed out, tired old man. Like,
you know what it was?
The last last WrestleMania the Undertaker was at. He's way too old to be out there,
But it's funny because when I saw that, I was like, okay, so we're finally seeing what wrestling wants to be or what wrestling thinks it is.
An action movie.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they want to be. But they're doing it in a ring, in a live audience. It's not the same. So this is what they wanted.
You're definitely going to have a Triple H sledgehammer match on WrestleMania. It's produced as a movie. Watch.
But again, no, I didn't watch WrestleMania. Has it already, is it done?
It's coming past. I think it was like a weekend or two ago.
It was like a 2-day event, right? Like they hosted.
Yeah, they broke it up for some reason. I don't know what the deal was. I didn't watch it. I just kind of caught some of the Boneyard highlights and read about it. I read that it was weird. I actually watched, I think it was like AEW because it just happened to be on TV, and there was no crowd. It's really weird. Like, you can just hear everything, and because it's not real and there's no pop with the crowd, it does make it way hokier than it should be. It's like watching local wrestling at like a gym or something. It's just
they had I guess a SmackDown. Again, I heard this in a news article. I didn't watch it, but there was, I guess, a SmackDown event that they had, and Chael Sonnen was talking about this too. And I was watching him, and he talked about how the wrestlers were in the ring and they had the house lights on, like they showed. They showcased the fact that they were in an empty stadium, like there was nobody in there, right? And the wrestlers were still talking like they were talking to the crowd, like all the people here and all the people. There's nobody there. Like they were talking like they normally would if there was still a live event. So they didn't film it tight, like they didn't focus just on the ring and keep the empty. They had the house lights on. They should have kept the house lights off, darkened the whole thing, and filmed tight in on the ring and on the wrestler, so you don't have to see this whole empty place that they're in.
Yeah,
that's how they did the That's how they filmed the Kevin Lee Charles Oliveira fight. Like, they didn't showcase the empty crowd. They zoomed in on the fight. That's how you should do it, but they didn't do that. So they completely shot themselves in the foot, and they essentially showed you got to see how fake it was. That you really, like, I think that really, like, showed you that's how fake this is. Like, they're like, if you take the crowd out of the equation and you see it just for what it is, it's just fake. It's just a fake show. And these bad actors going out there, just literally talking about nothing important. Like, it's I think they did themselves a huge disservice by doing it that way. So.
Yeah. But hey, for them, the show must go on. And
yeah,
I mean, if you're a fan and they're keeping up the storylines, I mean, hey, more power to you. You get something to watch on Mondays and Fridays.
Vince McMahon is the P.T. Barnum of this age. He has put on the show for many years. He's brought the circus to town many, many times, and he has found a way to persevere. And I thought that when the UFC started becoming big, I thought that would really sink. I thought it would sink wrestling, because there's a lot of people that, bought into this, that would buy into the idea that it was real somehow, like that it was. But then you saw how real, when people really fight, what it's like, and you're like, this doesn't compare in the slightest. So I thought it would have ripped back the veil for a lot of people, and for a lot of people, I'm sure it did. But they've managed
storyline. That's really what keeps people coming back. I think they realize that now. The wrestling Wrestling supports the storyline, and not the other way around at this point.
Yeah. So, it is what it is. But yeah, as far as Ronda Rousey is concerned, that's unfortunate that she had a falling out with that. But I understand why. If you just brought in there and you're giving everything and you don't have to pay your dues, the fans see that, they notice that, and they don't forget. And she was there for over a year, I think, or 2 years, or however long she was there.
Yeah, it was probably about 2. I think her main arc was she came on at WrestleMania and then fought for the title and lost, I think, to Charlotte Flair at the next WrestleMania, right? That was like their big arc. They had like a year.
She was part of the main event of WrestleMania, either the last one or the one before, was the women's championship.
Yeah, that was the last one. I actually signed up for WWE Network to watch it for free, and then I canceled it. It
was the first time the main event at WrestleMania was the women's title match.
Yeah.
They were going with, girl power and everything, and that's fine.
It was a decent match. I mean, it wasn't, you got to take all wrestling with a grain of salt. You just kind of enjoy it.
But I think people had a hard time reconciling with the fact that she was just given everything. That's my opinion. I think that's what
I agree. I mean,
because she didn't pay her dues in the industry and come up through the ranks like everyone else did. The fans just didn't respond to her in that way. They just saw her as, spoiled and just given everything, and they're not going to respect her. And I feel like, and probably a lot of her peers, I'm guessing there must have been a lot. I'm sure she got along with a lot of people in that locker room, but I would imagine that there was a lot of people who had been there for years and put their time and their heart, blood, and soul into that industry, and to see her come in there and just be given everything, that must have rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I'm sure she had a lot of enemies in that locker room too.
Oh, yeah. Actually, this kind of maybe brings up the next point I wanted to make, and this is the last point I had. But when you're at the bottom, I don't think Rousey affects you, because you still got to climb up to the middle just to get into the nick of things.
No, it's the people that are on the cusp of getting.
That's what I was going to say. It's the people in the middle. Those are the ones that can't get the next rung on the ladder because now there's too far of a gap and there's not enough room at the top. So those are the people that are screwed over the most. And so I don't know their names. I'm sure there's some of the divas or whatever. Or it can be a male wrestler that honestly just isn't getting as much time.
Well, yeah, because it's TV time. It's TV time. Like, because now this person is getting time on the air that takes away time from you being on the air.
Absolutely. And even if you have a great gimmick or you got a great storyline, it doesn't matter, because the UFC, WWE paid all the money to have Ronda Rousey, so they're going to put her on. Doesn't matter how bad she is. They're paying her more than they're paying you. And they got to make money on that somehow. But the last thing I wanted to bring up does have, I think, something to do with that. And it's Mike Tyson recently said this on a podcast, that boxers will always make more than MMA fighters. So what do you think about that? I have my thoughts, but what do you think about it?
Well, I mean, boxing is so entrenched into our society long before the UFC and MMA was, and they have so many. You can have. I don't know how it works with sponsors and things like that in boxing. I feel like if you're a boxer, you can get your own private sponsors and everything and make more money that way.
Yeah. You get the promotion has more control.
Whereas the MMA fighters, they cannot get individual sponsors. You're sponsored by Reebok or whoever the company as a whole is being sponsored by. So you're getting paid by them. You can't go out and get your own private sponsors. It's like, I think Brock Lesnar was actually the last fighter to have his own private sponsor. Oh no, actually no. He was, because
it was about everybody. Oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, he did have a little extra thing on the shorts. Didn't he like Jack Links or something, or Jimmy Jones?
Yeah, JJ something or whatever.
Yeah,
and he actually still has it in the WWE. That's the funny thing. He's the only wrestler that has a private sponsor. He managed to keep that.
It's all part of his gimmick for being a UFC fighter, you know.
It is, exactly. But at the same time, but he is actually getting paid by that sponsor. He's still making money off of them. So he's getting money outside of the WWE. So the WWE is being forced to give free promotion to this company that Brock Lesnar is being sponsored by, because he's demanded in his contract that he still wears that on his shorts. And, you know, because he had them over a barrel, because he's the big star that he is, they couldn't say no to him. He's like, it was either this or I walk. You know, he made them, he's strong on them and doing it. So good for him. But yeah,
I think he fought this past WrestleMania. I can't remember who he fought or what the result was or whatever. I don't even know, but he's still headlining. He's still one of the big guys there. So, but yeah, I think the problem with boxing, or problem with MMA, however you want to look at it, is that there's a very small space at the top for top boxers, right? Canelo, you know, it used to be Mayweather, Triple G. You got Lomachenko climbing there. You got a handful. Then I'm forgetting about the biggest. You got Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, and Anthony Joshua, right? So you got a handful of guys in the boxing world. Everybody besides who I named, if you're the average person, you maybe know half of those names or close to none of them. And then if you're an MMA fan, maybe you know the ones I mentioned. And if you're a boxing fan, obviously you know more. But there's not much space at the top. Whereas the UFC is they're the entire promotion. They're everything for the fighters. And so they can promote across the different weight classes in ways that boxing just doesn't touch. If you're like a lightweight in boxing or middleweight, you know, even if you have like an IBF title, most people don't know who the hell you are, you know, whereas if you're even a middleweight contender in the UFC, people probably know who you are. They're probably watching you fight. You could even be a main event in like Omaha, Nebraska, and people know about you because you're on ESPN every week. We're talking about you. You're a factor. And because the top is spread so much wider in MMA, because you have all these different guys to worry about, women to worry about, I think that's why you see less money unless you become, you know, you transcend the sport. Khabib's like that. GSP was like that. Connor's still like that. Rousey was like that. If you can transcend the sport and become a cult of personality and a celebrity on top of the athletics, then you ascend to the next position, and that's where the real money is. But, you know, it's still not quite what boxing is, but I think that just comes to the fact that, like, once you're Mayweather, you are, you know, the money promotion. You're everything. You know, you're cutting the sponsorships. You're getting a cut of the gate, the pay-per-views. You just have more control over things.
Yeah. Hey, I don't think Mike Tyson's wrong. Maybe one day that'll change as the sport grows. It's just, you know, boxing's been around a lot longer, and there's a lot more, you know, stuff going on there with promotions and everything else. But I don't know. I am of the feeling that eventually MMA will become a bigger sport than boxing. I don't know. I really feel that for some reason.
I think it honestly is, to be honest. It's always going to be a little more fringy, though. I think the average person would be like, oh, that's boxing. Like, it's been around for hundreds of years or 150 years, whatever it is. And these guys just punch each other and it's very civilized. Whereas you look at an MMA event and you get that highlight reel of Edson Barboza wheel kicking a guy, and he's just like out on his feet, brutally knocked out, or blood spurting all over the place. It's always going to be that like fringy blood sport.
Yeah,
so,
it is now. But
you know,
as time goes on, if enough time goes by, it'll be mainstream.
Maybe. We'll see. It's on ESPN now. I mean,
people
it's
getting
owned by
used to
Disney.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, what isn't owned by Disney nowadays? Am I right?
Right. That's a whole different podcast.
they got their fingers and everything. But yeah. So I mean, hey, I hope that one day the world of MMA will be able to make as much money as boxing. I don't know. We'll see what happens. There is money to be made in this, and there is a lot of star power in the UFC now, more than there was before.
Yeah, it's always getting better, man. There's always a new personality popping up. It isn't just the champions. Like the top 10 in most divisions. Well, I mean, not most divisions, but at least lightweight and featherweight to that extent. You know, there's tons of guys to talk about. You know, we're still talking about Chad Mendez. We're talking about new guys like Zabit, Brian Ortega, Max Holloway, Volkanovski. You know, there's all these guys. You know, feather or lightweight's very similar, unless you get to like the fringes of like flyweight, where the talent pool's not deep, or heavyweight, where you get kind of a lot of not the best athletes. You know, maybe they're guys who could fight, but they're not like, you know.
Yeah.
They're not Khabib level athletics.
You know what I would love to see? I would love to see an inter-promotional event where it's like UFC versus Bellator, where you get like the best the best fighters from each one and have them compete against each other?
There's Michael Venom Page and Michael Chan. There's a couple of guys that I can honestly say, yes, I would love to see that happen. But some of the other fighters, they were already in the UFC. Like, they got Matt Mitrione, Chael Sonnen went there for a while. Gregor Mousasi, Rory McDonald was there. Like, they've had so many former UFC fighters that have gone there to kind of like make more money or get better, star power in the promotion, whatever. I don't know how. Basically, Bellator's not deep enough to really, I think, have a cross-promotional thing. And, I can't speak to ONE FC. I don't watch them. But I think, honestly, ONE FC would probably be the most set up for that because they could promote somebody that is, like, a true star out there that we don't know about in the U.S. that's only popular in Asia. And then we could kind of have that, like, Chuck Liddell going to Pride to fight Vanderlei Silva situation. Like, most USA MMA fans, they kind of heard of Vanderlei Silva and such, or heard of Fedor, but they didn't see him fight, and they were watching, this one guy knock everybody out in Chuck Liddell and send him like a hitman over to Japan. I think you have to have something like that where it's like, oh, here's that guy you don't realize behind the curtain taking on who you think is cream of the crop, and then you have him clash. Bellator doesn't really have that. They have like, oh, cool,
or
that guy used to fight in his prime in the UFC, and now he's an old man, fighting over in Bellator.
Yeah. I would love to see that. Mostly because I would love to see Mighty Mouse fight Henry Cejudo again for the title.
Yeah, I think that's a good fight. I don't want to. This podcast is starting to go kind of long, I think, but supposedly he's supposed to fight Cruz. I think that's the next fight they're talking about making because Aldo can't get out of Brazil. So Cejudo and Cruz, I think, is the next bantamweight title fight they're talking about. I like that fight personally. I don't think Cruz deserves it on the rankings, but he's put in a body of work over a career, and I think he deserves it from kind of his history.
I just hope he's ready. I hope he can give Cejudo a good fight because he's been out of it for a little bit, and I hope ring rust will not be a factor for him.
It's hard to say with Cruz. He had ring rust, and he came back and won the title basically against Dillashaw. And he had just fought Uriah Faber, right? And he went to go make his title defense against Cody Garbrandt and got beat up basically. And I think injuries plague that guy. So I think honestly rest and recovery is the most important thing for him. It's not staying active. He says he doesn't believe in ring rust. I think probably for that reason is that when he does fight a lot, he gets hurt and he's just not the same. So the best version of Cruz is a rested Cruz. And I think he can go out and honestly beat Cejudo. When Cruz fought a guy like Cejudo, not that they're stylistically exactly the same, but size-wise, he dismantled Mighty Mouse when they fought 135 pounds. Yeah. Mighty Mouse was way too small to be fighting a bantamweight. I think Cejudo might find that he's way too small to fight a guy like Cruz. Cruz is actually he's not very muscularly big, but his frame is big. He's like Conor McGregor size. He just doesn't carry as much muscle. And I think it might be a lot for Cejudo to deal with.
Cejudo did well against Marlon Moraes. How do you say it?
Marlon Moraes. I think Moraes is even a little smaller than Cruz. We'll see. Cejudo, I think, yes, he did beat Dillashaw. At 125 pounds, and he beat Moraes, after Dillashaw was stripped. I don't know. I'd like to see him tested more. There's a lot of great fighters, 135 pounds. Cruz aside, you got Peter Yan right now, who looks like a world beater. You got Corey Sandhagen, who looks amazing. And it was Aljamain Sterling, I believe, is also another 135er, if I'm not mistaken. Those guys I think could be phenomenal for Cejudo. So I'm really looking forward to those and to see how great of a champion Cejudo can honestly be.
Yeah. Hey, I give all my props to Dominic Cruz. I hope that he can pull off something great. But, it's like I said, it's trying times right now. Who knows what's going to happen? We just, keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best, brother. But,
that's it. I think this podcast has honestly run its course, though. So, hey, man, thanks for coming on. I think we could probably do this again. I mean, in light of the this pandemic, you talked earlier about how things are changing and people working from home, and I think we can probably do something like this again in the future. I always thought you had to be in the same room, honestly, to make it work, and I think we're seeing that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, no, it's fine, brother. All right, we can call it here. It was great doing this with you, man.
All right, so that'll do it for this week. I want to thank Mr. Curt, your friend in the business. Also, I want to thank Cappy's Fine Wine and Spirits, so many of the products that we get for review here ultimately purchased there. And while they're not really a sponsor of the show, I still like to give them a shout out nevertheless.
So thank you for also supporting the show. For those of you out there that are on the Patreon, thank you for supporting the show just by listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, your favorite podcast platform of choice. And I just want to say thank you overall. So I don't know what we'll do for the next episode. I think we're probably looking at another beer review. Depending on how much news comes out, we could potentially have another conversation with Curt. We'll see how it all plays out. But thank you for listening. Until I speak with you again next time, happy living.